Dawn breaks over the lagoon at Tarawa with deceptive calm. The water is clear. The reef is visible beneath the surface. Palm trees stand intact beyond the beach, barely moving in the early light. From offshore, the island looks small, contained, almost manageable. For the men approaching it, that illusion lasts only minutes. On 20th November 1943, the first wave of U.S. Marines begins its run toward Betio Island, the narrow strip of land anchoring Japan's defenses in the Gilbert Islands. Naval guns have fired for hours. Smoke drifts inland. Commanders believe the bombardment has done its work. Then the landing craft slow. They grind against coral that was expected to be underwater. Engines strain, ramps drop too far from shore. Marines step out into waist-deep water, then chest-deep water, then water over their heads, burdened with rifles, packs, radios, and fear. Ahead of them, Japanese machine guns open fire. The lagoon becomes a killing field. Bullets stitch the water. Men fall and do not rise. Units lose cohesion within seconds. Orders dissolve into instinct. What was meant to be a rapid dash across a short beach turns into a brutal, exposed march of hundreds of yards under direct fire. On Betio, Japanese defenders watch exactly what they were trained to see. Their island has done its job. Concrete bunkers, steel-reinforced positions, and interlocking fields of fire dominate every approach. The reef has forced the enemy to reveal himself. The lagoon has stripped away speed. From the Japanese perspective, this is proof that the island cannot be taken. And yet, the Marines keep moving. Some crawl, some wade. Some drag wounded comrades while still under fire. Leadership emerges in fragments, by men who survive long enough to make decisions no one planned for. Every step forward costs lives, but stopping costs more. This is Operation Galvanic. A landing so violent, so concentrated, and so shocking that it will redefine how the Pacific War is fought. Not because it is large, but because it is unforgiving. Because it exposes the gap between planning and reality. Because it compresses the cost of modern amphibious warfare into just 76 hours on a strip of sand barely 2 miles long. What happens at Tarawa will echo far beyond the Gilbert Islands. But to understand why this landing mattered and why it was allowed to unfold this way, we have to step back to the decisions, assumptions, and miscalculations that brought American forces to this reef in the first place. By late 1943, the Pacific War has entered a decisive phase, even if it does not yet feel that way to the men who will fight it. The United States has been at war for nearly 2 years. Guadalcanal has been won at enormous cost. The long struggle through the Solomon Islands has proven that Japanese forces can be defeated, but only through persistence, adaptation, and sustained pressure. What remains uncertain is how the United States will carry that fight across the vast Central Pacific. Geography dominates every decision. The Japanese Empire stretches across thousands of miles of ocean, anchored by island chains that function as forward outposts and defensive shields. These islands are not random holdings. They are carefully selected positions designed to protect sea lanes, air routes, and communication links between Japan and its conquered territories. Together, they form a layered system meant to slow any enemy advance long enough to make it unsustainable. The Gilbert Islands sit at the outer edge of that system. To Japanese planners, they are not the core of the empire's defense, but they are essential stepping stones. Betio Island at Tarawa Atoll is small, flat, and densely fortified. Its airstrip allows Japanese aircraft to monitor American movement across the Central Pacific. Its garrison is positioned not to maneuver, but to deny access. For American planners, the Gilberts present a hard choice. They could be bypassed, isolated, and left to wither. But doing so would leave a Japanese air presence behind advancing forces, threatening supply lines and future operations. If the United States intends to push deeper into the Central Pacific, the Gilberts must be neutralized. That decision marks a turning point. Operation Galvanic becomes the first major American offensive across the Central Pacific, aimed directly at a heavily fortified island rather than a peripheral objective. It is not a test run. It is a declaration of intent. The United States is no longer content to fight only at the edges. It intends to dismantle Japan's defensive system island by island. Betio is chosen deliberately. Its small size makes it seem manageable. Its defenses are known, at least in outline. American intelligence estimates the garrison to be strong, but not insurmountable. The belief is that overwhelming naval gunfire, combined with a rapid amphibious assault, can break the island before Japanese defenders have time to react. Japanese confidence runs just as deep. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki, commanding the defense of Tarawa, believes the island cannot be taken by frontal assault. His bunkers are reinforced with concrete and steel. Artillery pieces are carefully positioned. Machine guns cover every likely approach. The reef, visible at low tide, is expected to act as a natural barrier, forcing landing craft to slow or stop. The battle is framed in absolutes on both sides. For Japan, Tarawa is proof that fortified islands can stop the American advance. For the United States, it is a necessary sacrifice to gain momentum across the Central Pacific. Neither side expects a quick or clean fight, but neither side fully anticipates just how compressed and violent it will become. Planning accelerates through the summer and fall of 1943. American naval forces assemble in numbers never before used in the Pacific. Marines of the 2nd Marine Division train intensively for amphibious assault, rehearsing landings, bunker clearing, and coordination with naval gunfire. New landing craft are introduced, promising greater flexibility over reefs and shallow water. But some assumptions remain untested. Tidal conditions are based on limited data. Reef depth is estimated rather than confirmed. Intelligence photographs reveal defenses, but not how they will perform under real bombardment. Confidence grows alongside preparation, masking gaps that will only become visible once the landing begins. By November, the invasion force is underway. Ships converge on the Gilberts. Aircraft strike Japanese positions in advance. The weight of American power builds steadily offshore. From a distance, Tarawa looks overwhelmed before the first Marine even steps ashore. That impression will not survive first contact, because what happens next will reveal not only the strength of Japanese defenses, but the cost of learning modern amphibious warfare in real time, under fire, with no margin for error. As the invasion fleet closes on the Gilbert Islands, the confidence of American planners rests on two beliefs. The first is firepower. By late 1943, the United States Navy has refined the use of pre-landing bombardment. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers are expected to pulverize enemy defenses before the first wave goes ashore. Aircraft will strike from above. The assumption is that few defenders can survive such punishment, and those who do will be disorganized and unable to respond effectively. The second belief is speed. Amphibious doctrine emphasizes momentum. Landing forces are meant to move quickly from the waterline, seize the beach, and push inland before the defender can recover. On a small island like Betio, planners expect this process to take hours, not days. The narrower the battlefield, the faster it should collapse. These assumptions shape Operation Galvanic. Tarawa is chosen not because it is easy, but because it appears solvable within a short, intense window. The 2nd Marine Division is tasked with the assault, supported by one of the most powerful naval task forces assembled to that point in the Pacific War. The expectation is not minimal casualties, but acceptable ones, traded for strategic momentum. Yet beneath this confidence, critical uncertainties remain. The most dangerous of these is the reef. Tarawa's lagoon is shallow and ringed by coral that extends hundreds of yards from shore. Amphibious tractors are intended to cross it, carrying Marines directly onto the beach. But these vehicles are limited in number. Many Marines will still rely on traditional landing craft, which require sufficient water depth to reach the sand. Tidal data is incomplete. American planners rely on charts that underestimate how low the tide may run on the morning of the assault. The assumption is that even a low tide will provide enough water for landing craft to cross the reef. No full-scale rehearsal can replicate the exact conditions that will exist at Tarawa. Japanese defenders understand this vulnerability. Their planning assumes that the reef will slow and expose any attacker. Bunkers and gun positions are oriented not just toward the beach, but toward the lagoon itself. Interlocking fields of fire are designed to trap attackers in open water, where movement is slow and cover non-existent. Rear Admiral Shibasaki's confidence reflects this preparation. He believes that Tarawa's defenses can withstand bombardment and repel a landing. His garrison is well supplied and disciplined. Orders emphasize holding ground at all costs. There is no plan for withdrawal or maneuver. Every position is meant to be fought to destruction. American intelligence does not fully grasp the depth of this system. Aerial photographs reveal bunkers and trenches, but they cannot show how interconnected the defenses are, or how well protected they are against shellfire. Planners assume that prolonged bombardment will neutralize most resistance. What they underestimate is how much of the island's defensive network lies below ground. As the fleet reaches its staging positions, final preparations unfold. Marines load ammunition and equipment. Briefings emphasize objectives, timing, and coordination. Men are told to expect heavy fire, but also reassured that naval support will be overwhelming. The language reflects experience gained earlier in the war, but it also carries the weight of optimism. The Japanese garrison waits. They listen as preliminary strikes hit the island. They remain sheltered in reinforced positions, conserving strength. They know the moment of decision will not come during bombardment, but afterward, when the enemy must cross open water and exposed sand. By the evening of 19th of November, everything is in place. American forces believe they are about to demonstrate the effectiveness of modern amphibious warfare. Japanese defenders believe they are about to prove that fortified islands cannot be taken by frontal assault. Both sides are wrong in different ways. What follows will shock Japanese defenders not because the island falls, but because the attackers keep coming despite catastrophic losses. And it will shock American commanders because victory will arrive only after assumptions collapse under fire. The stage is set for a landing that will compress the brutal realities of island warfare into a single, unforgettable morning. The first assault waves carry the full weight of those assumptions into the lagoon. When the ramps drop, the shock is immediate. Amphibious tractors grind forward as planned, but many of the landing craft behind them stop abruptly on the reef. The water is far shallower than expected. Engines strain, propellers churn uselessly. Marines realize in seconds that they will not reach the beach the way they were told. They have no choice but to get out. Men step into open water hundreds of yards from shore, burdened by rifles, ammunition, radios, and packs. The reef cuts at boots and legs. Balance is hard to keep. Ahead, the beach offers no cover. Japanese machine guns begin firing almost immediately, sweeping the lagoon with disciplined bursts. Unit cohesion disintegrates under fire. Formations break apart as men search for any depression in the reef, any momentary pause in the shooting. Officers are hit early. Radios are lost or destroyed. Orders become gestures and shouted fragments. What remains is individual movement forward, driven by instinct and survival rather than plan. The lagoon becomes the most dangerous place on the battlefield. There is nowhere to hide. Bullets strike the water with sharp cracks. Mortar rounds fall among the advancing Marines. Some men are hit and vanish beneath the surface, weighed down by equipment. Others push on, dragging wounded comrades while still exposed. Leadership emerges in fragments. Non-commissioned officers step forward where commissioned officers fall. Decisions are made in seconds, without consultation. Some Marines sprint forward between bursts of fire. Others crawl, some freeze, unable to move until someone physically pulls them along. Courage appears in uneven human ways, shaped by fear rather than immunity to it. Those who reach the beach find little relief. The shoreline is narrow and crowded, backed by sea walls and debris. Japanese fire continues from bunkers positioned to rake the sand lengthwise. Casualties pile up in the first few yards. Medical aid is nearly impossible to deliver. The beach offers survival, but not safety. Progress inland is measured in feet. Marines use grenades, rifle fire, and sheer persistence to reduce individual firing points. Tanks that manage to cross the reef become immediate targets, drawing heavy fire. Some are disabled almost as soon as they land. Others provide crucial support, blasting bunkers at point-blank range. The psychological shock is profound. Many Marines have trained extensively for amphibious assault, but nothing in training prepares them for wading under fire with no cover, no momentum, and no clear command structure. The sense of vulnerability is total. The enemy is mostly unseen, felt through fire rather than sight. And yet, forward movement continues. Small groups begin to break through gaps in the defenses. Bunkers are silenced one by one. Fire support from offshore adjusts as observers relay information under extreme pressure. What was meant to be a rapid landing becomes a grinding fight for survival. From the Japanese perspective, the battle unfolds differently. They see attackers stalled and exposed. Their defenses are working as designed. Casualties among the attackers are heavy. Confidence rises that the island will hold. What they do not yet see is how quickly American forces are adapting to disaster. Because even as the landing goes wrong, the assault does not collapse. It fragments, bends, and absorbs punishment. But it continues. And in that continuation lies the first sign that Tarawa, despite its preparation, may not be able to stop an enemy willing to pay such a price to reach the sand. For the Japanese defenders, the opening hours confirm everything they were taught to believe. The reef has done its work. The lagoon has slowed the enemy. The beach is killing ground. From inside concrete bunkers and reinforced pillboxes, defenders fire methodically, conserving ammunition and maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Each position is designed to support the next, creating a web of resistance that turns a small island into a trap. Their doctrine leaves no room for retreat. Orders are explicit. Every position is to be held until destroyed. Withdrawal would only expose other defenses and invite collapse. Japanese troops fight from enclosed spaces that protect them from naval shellfire and air attack, emerging only when targets are close enough to ensure effect. This creates a brutal asymmetry. American Marines must expose themselves to move forward. Japanese defenders can wait. Close quarters combat favors those prepared to die in place, and the defenders understand this. Grenades, rifles, and machine guns are used at point-blank range. Flamethrowers and demolition charges become necessary, not because they are efficient, but because there is no other way to dislodge an enemy that refuses to leave. Technology becomes personal. Naval gunfire that seemed overwhelming offshore proves blunt against reinforced concrete. Bombardment has shaken positions, but not eliminated them. Tanks, when they reach the beach, become essential tools, firing directly into bunker apertures at distances measured in yards. Every destroyed position requires deliberate effort and exposure. The moral dimension sharpens quickly. There is no expectation of surrender. Japanese defenders do not signal or withdraw. When positions are overrun, resistance continues until it cannot physically continue. Marines quickly learn that wounded defenders may still fight. The line between combat and clearance blurs, forcing decisions under pressure that leave lasting impressions. This reality shocks American command. Tarawa was expected to validate Amphibious doctrine, not expose its weaknesses so publicly. Casualty reports rise faster than anticipated. Units lose effectiveness within hours. Communications break down repeatedly. The assault continues not because conditions improve, but because stopping is impossible. Back home, the consequences will be immediate. Photographs taken during the battle will soon reach the American public, showing bodies stacked along the narrow beach and floating in the lagoon. The violence of Tarawa will not remain confined to after-action reports. It will be seen, debated, and questioned, forcing a reckoning with the cost of the Pacific campaign. For Japanese leadership, the battle sends a different message. Tarawa proves that even the strongest island defenses can be overwhelmed if the attacker accepts enough loss. The assumption that fortification alone can halt the American advance begins to crack. If Betio can fall, so can other islands once considered secure. Yet the lesson is interpreted differently. Rather than prompting reconsideration, Japanese doctrine hardens. If fortified islands cannot guarantee defense, then resistance must be absolute. Casualties are not a reason to adjust strategy, but proof of commitment. This conclusion will shape later battles with devastating effect. On the island, the fight grinds forward. By the end of the first day, American forces hold only a fragile foothold. Japanese defenders remain active across much of Betio. Neither side has achieved resolution. What exists instead is a compressed, violent standoff, with no space for maneuver and no room for error. The battle will not be decided by a breakthrough or a single command decision. It will be decided by exhaustion, adaptation, and the slow destruction of a defensive system designed never to retreat. And that process will reach its breaking point over the next 72 hours. The decisive phase begins on the morning of 20th November 1943, and it begins in chaos. By midday, it is clear that Operation Galvanic has not gone according to plan. The reef has stranded entire assault waves. Casualties are severe. Units are fragmented across the narrow beach. Commanders offshore struggle to piece together an accurate picture of what is happening on Betio. Yet the assault does not pause. Small groups of Marines, often cut off from their parent units, begin pushing inland wherever they can. They move along seawalls, through shell holes, and across open sand under constant fire. Each advance is improvised. Each gain is measured in yards wrested from fortified ground. Japanese defenses remain largely intact. Concrete bunkers line the beach, their firing slits positioned to rake the shoreline lengthwise. Behind them lie trenches, communication tunnels, and additional pillboxes arranged in depth. The island's defenders fight with discipline, firing only when targets present themselves. Ammunition is conserved. Positions are held even when surrounded. The Marines adapt under pressure. Tanks that manage to cross the reef become focal points. They draw fire away from infantry and deliver direct shots into bunker apertures. Engineers move forward with demolition charges, crawling into lethal proximity to destroy individual positions. Flamethrowers are used to clear caves and enclosed spaces that cannot be taken any other way. Progress is slow and costly. Each bunker becomes its own battle. Grenades are thrown, charges are placed. Marines wait for explosions before moving again. Casualties continue to mount, not in waves, but in a steady accumulation that erodes unit strength hour by hour. Command and control is fragmented. Radio contact is unreliable. Naval gunfire support is difficult to coordinate as observers are pinned down or killed. Some destroyers move dangerously close to shore, firing directly at visible targets to relieve pressure on the beach. These actions save lives, but they also underscore how narrow the margin has become. By nightfall, the situation remains uncertain. American forces hold only a shallow lodgment across parts of Betio. Japanese defenders remain active and dangerous. Darkness brings no relief. Instead, it brings infiltration attempts, sudden bursts of fire, and the constant fear of counterattack. Marines dig in where they stand. There is little room to maneuver and little cover to be had. The wounded lie close to the fighting. Sleep comes in minutes, not hours. Weapons are kept within reach. The battle does not pause. It merely changes tempo. For Japanese defenders, the first day reinforces confidence. The enemy has paid heavily for every gain. The island has not collapsed. Resistance remains organized. From their perspective, the American assault appears stalled, bleeding itself against defenses designed to endure exactly this kind of attack. But beneath that confidence, cracks are forming. Some positions have been isolated. Ammunition has been expended faster than expected in certain sectors. Communication between defensive nodes is uneven. The defenders are fighting well, but they are fighting alone, with no prospect of reinforcement or relief. As the first night passes, the battle settles into a grim rhythm. American forces prepare to resume the advance at first light, knowing that failure to press forward will only strengthen the defense. Japanese forces brace to hold their ground through another day of bombardment and close combat. Everything now depends on endurance. Tarawa will not be decided by clever maneuver or sudden collapse. It will be decided by which side can sustain loss longer, adapt faster, and continue fighting when planning has given way entirely to necessity. The first day has revealed how wrong the assumptions were. The next days will determine whether that realization comes too late. By the second morning, 24 November 1943, the character of the battle has hardened. What remains on Betio is no longer an amphibious assault, but a grinding ground fight fought at point-blank range. The reef no longer dominates the battle. The beach is no longer the center. The fight has moved inland, into a maze of bunkers, trenches, and blasted terrain where distance is measured in feet and time in seconds. American commanders adjust their approach. Rather than pushing broad advances, units focus on methodical destruction. Tanks lead wherever possible, rolling forward slowly, firing directly into firing slits and bunker mouths. Infantry follows close behind, using the armor as moving cover. Engineers and assault teams operate in pairs and small groups, placing charges, withdrawing, and advancing again through smoke and debris. Each position must be eliminated completely. Japanese defenders do not abandon bunkers when isolated. They fight until killed or buried. Some positions reopen fire hours after being bypassed, forcing Marines to turn back and clear ground they thought was secured. The island resists not as a single line, but as dozens of independent fortresses. Night brings no pause. Japanese soldiers launch infiltration attempts, slipping through gaps to attack command posts, aid stations, and supply points. Marines respond with defensive fires and tight perimeter control, learning quickly that darkness offers the defender as much danger as opportunity. Exhaustion sets in, but vigilance cannot slip. By the third day, the balance begins to shift. Japanese resistance weakens unevenly. Ammunition shortages become apparent. Some bunkers fall silent permanently, others fire sporadically. Communication between defensive positions breaks down under sustained pressure. What remains is courage without coordination. American momentum grows slowly but decisively. More tanks are brought ashore. Naval gunfire is adjusted with greater precision. Airstrikes are called in closer to friendly positions. What was chaos on the first day becomes brutal efficiency on the third. Each advance is still costly, but it is more deliberate, more controlled. The final collapse comes piece by piece. Strong points in the island's eastern end are reduced one after another. Japanese defenders launch final, desperate attacks that are quickly contained. By 23 November 1943, organized resistance has effectively ended. Isolated individuals continue to fight or hide, but the defensive system has been destroyed. The island is declared secure after 76 hours of continuous combat. The victory is undeniable. The cost is staggering. American casualties are far higher than anticipated for an island barely 2 miles long. Bodies line the beach and lagoon. The scale of loss shocks commanders who walk the battlefield afterward, seeing firsthand what modern fortified island warfare demands. For Japanese defenders, the outcome confirms a grim truth. Betio fell not because its defenses were weak, but because the attacker absorbed punishment without breaking. The island did exactly what it was designed to do. It inflicted maximum loss. What it could not do was stop an enemy willing to pay that price. Operation Galvanic ends not with celebration, but with silence. Men stand among shattered concrete and twisted steel, surrounded by evidence of what endurance has achieved and what it has cost. The island is taken, but the lessons it delivers are written in blood. Those lessons will not be ignored, because what happened on Tarawa will shape every amphibious landing that follows, forcing a transformation in doctrine, preparation, and expectations across the Pacific War. And with Betio secured, attention turns to what this brutal victory means beyond the shoreline. The immediate aftermath of the battle forces a reckoning that extends far beyond Tarawa's shattered shoreline. When reports are compiled and casualties counted, the numbers are sobering. In just 76 hours of fighting, American forces have suffered losses that rival far larger campaigns. For an island barely 2 miles long, the cost appears disproportionate, even by the standards of a global war. Commanders who expected a difficult landing confront the reality that their assumptions about fortified islands were dangerously incomplete. The shock does not remain confined to military circles. Photographs taken during and after the battle reached the United States within weeks. They show bodies crowded along the narrow beach, Marines lying where they fell, and wrecked landing craft scattered across the lagoon. For the first time in the Pacific War, the American public sees the unfiltered cost of an amphibious assault against a prepared enemy. The reaction is immediate and intense. Questions are raised in newspapers and Congress. Why were the casualties so high? Why did the landing craft fail to reach shore? Why were Marines forced to wade such distances under fire? The battle becomes a national conversation about preparation, intelligence, and the human price of strategic decisions. Within the military, the response is blunt and urgent. Tarawa is recognized as a tactical victory that exposed critical flaws. Naval bombardment, though massive, is shown to be insufficient against deeply reinforced positions. Intelligence failures regarding tides and reef depth are acknowledged openly. Amphibious coordination is judged inadequate for the realities of heavily fortified islands. There is no attempt to soften the lesson. Senior leaders understand that the Pacific campaign will require dozens more landings like Tarawa. If the same mistakes are repeated, the cost will become unsustainable. The battle is treated not as an anomaly, but as a warning. For Japanese leadership, the outcome delivers a different message. Tarawa proves that fortified islands can inflict severe casualties, but it also proves that they cannot stop an American advance backed by overwhelming resources. The loss of Betio undermines confidence in the idea that static defense alone can decide the war. Even a perfectly prepared island, defended to destruction, has fallen. Yet this realization does not lead to restraint. Instead, Japanese doctrine hardens further. If sacrifice did not stop the enemy at Tarawa, then future defenses must demand even greater sacrifice. This conclusion will shape battles yet to come, increasing their brutality rather than reducing it. On Betio itself, the silence that follows combat is heavy. Survivors move among wreckage and bodies, processing what has happened. Victory brings no celebration, only relief that the fighting has ended and awareness that many did not live to see it. The island becomes a physical ledger of cost, forcing reflection on what modern amphibious warfare truly requires. That reflection will not remain abstract, because the lessons of Tarawa will be carried forward immediately, reshaping how the next landings are planned, supported, and executed across the Pacific. The second consequence of Tarawa unfolds not in memory, but in reform. Within weeks, the battle becomes a case study across the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. Reports are dissected line by line. Assumptions are challenged openly. What happened on Betio is treated not as an unavoidable tragedy, but as a problem that must be solved before the next landing. Amphibious doctrine changes immediately. Pre-landing bombardment is extended and intensified. The idea that firepower alone can neutralize hardened defenses is abandoned in favor of systematic destruction. Naval gunfire is planned with greater precision, focused on bunker reduction rather than area suppression. Airstrikes are integrated more tightly with ground movement, not as preparation alone, but as continuous support. Tidal intelligence becomes a priority. Hydrographic surveys are expanded. Reef depth and lagoon conditions are studied in detail before future operations. Landing schedules are adjusted to account for environmental variables that Tarawa exposed so brutally. The margin for assumption narrows sharply. Equipment evolves as well. More amphibious tractors are allocated to assault waves, reducing reliance on craft vulnerable to reefs and tides. Armor support is emphasized earlier in landings, recognizing its critical role in reducing fortified positions. Flamethrowers and demolition teams are standardized rather than improvised. Most importantly, expectations change. Tarawa ends the belief that fortified islands can be taken quickly, cheaply, or cleanly. Commanders begin planning operations with the assumption of severe resistance and heavy casualties. This realism does not reduce loss, but it prevents surprise. The psychological shock that defined Tarawa is not repeated in later landings. The impact is visible in subsequent operations. At Kwajalein, Saipan, and beyond, amphibious assaults are executed with greater coordination and depth. Casualties remain high, but momentum improves. The lessons learned on Betio are paid forward, saving lives in later campaigns even as the war's brutality intensifies. For the Marines, Tarawa becomes a defining moment. It marks the transition from learning amphibious warfare through trial to mastering it through adaptation. The men who fought there carry its memory into every subsequent landing, shaping leadership decisions and unit behavior under fire. For Japan, the implications are grim. The battle confirms that American forces will not be deterred by loss alone. Defensive doctrine based solely on fortification cannot halt an enemy with overwhelming resources and the will to adapt. Yet instead of moderating resistance, Japanese leadership doubles down on attrition, ensuring that future battles will be even more costly for both sides. Operation Galvanic thus leaves a paradoxical legacy. It is both a warning and a blueprint. It shows how devastating modern amphibious warfare can be, and how it must be fought to succeed. The island of Betio becomes more than a battlefield. It becomes a lesson written in blood, carried forward into every beach that follows. With the consequences of Tarawa now fully revealed, what remains is to step back and consider what this small island ultimately meant for the Pacific War and for the nature of modern combat itself. Tarawa does not stand out in the Pacific War because of its size. It stands out because of what it forced both sides to confront. On a strip of land barely 2 miles long, modern amphibious warfare revealed itself in its rawest form. Planning collided with environment. Firepower collided with fortification. Courage collided with inevitability. Nothing about the battle allowed distance, maneuver, or illusion to soften the cost. For the United States, Tarawa stripped away any remaining belief that island warfare could be mastered without suffering. It showed that technology and preparation could narrow the margin of loss, but never remove it. Every future landing would carry echoes of Betio's lagoon, where assumptions drowned alongside men forced to wade forward anyway. Yet Tarawa also proved something essential. It proved that fortified islands were not invulnerable, that concrete, steel, and doctrine could be broken by adaptation and persistence. The price was staggering, but the result reshaped the war. From this point forward, American forces no longer asked whether an island could be taken, only how much it would cost and how that cost could be reduced next time. For Japan, the lesson cut in the opposite direction. Tarawa confirmed that sacrifice alone could not halt an industrial enemy willing to absorb loss and learn from it. The belief that static defense could preserve the empire collapsed quietly on Betio's beaches. What replaced it was not restraint, but desperation, driving future battles toward even greater destruction. The human legacy of Tarawa lingers longest. It lives in the memories of those who survived a landing that went wrong in every way except one. The assault did not stop. Men kept moving forward when retreat was easier and safer, not because victory was assured, but because stopping meant surrendering the initiative forever. Operation Galvanic did not win the Pacific War, but it forged the method by which the war would be won. Every later island assault carried Tarawa's lessons in its planning tables and its casualty estimates. Every beach that followed was shaped by the knowledge paid for here. On Betio, the Pacific War lost its innocence. In its place emerged a clearer, harsher understanding of what victory would demand, and why the path to it would be measured not in miles, but in resolve under fire.